Hello.
Hey, hi James, how are you? You right?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Great. We'll just give people a few seconds before it gets to 1:30 and then we'll get going.
Okay.
How's the weather there today?
It's good actually. It's nice, yeah. Nice spring day.
Very,
Birds are singing and yeah, sun's out.
it's supposed to be warm. Yeah, I think it's warmer this week, which is like, yeah, a bit wetter but warmer, which is nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll begin and then people will probably join as we're speaking. So, welcome everyone to Queer Oral Connections. This is the series of talks that we're doing in the lead up to our project. And this is the fifth talk today, and I'm going to be talking with the very talented and wonderful James Aldridge. Just to sort of remind people what Queer Oral Connections is, we are producing both a theatre show and a documentary film, which will be performed and screened at heritage venues this summer. And we are exploring queer rural lives, so people who live and work in all kinds of rural places across the UK, in all kinds of work, and sort of charting their experiences and stories. And as part of that, so today I'd like to welcome James. James is a Wiltshire-based artist, a visual artist working with people and places. His practice involves researches into the role of the artful and embodied explorations of place in learning and their benefit for people's well-being. He's carried out residencies and commissions and curated exhibitions for galleries, museums and environmental organisations, and is an associate artist with CAS in Andover, the Climate Museum UK and MK Gallery in Milton Keynes. And his current project, which we're going to be talking about today, is researching LGBTQI experiences of and perspectives on rivers through the Queer River Project. Walking, talking and making with artists, writers, ecologists and all kinds of other people along the Salisbury and Bristol Avons. Hello James, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
So just to sort of begin with, just to give people a sense of where you live and work, what's the setting like, the landscape, the place you live? Tell us a bit about how long you've been there.
Sure. I live in a little village in the Pewsey Vale area of Wiltshire. So it's pretty much in the middle of Wiltshire, halfway between Swindon at the top and Salisbury towards the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it's a big valley with the Marlborough Downs to one side and Salisbury Plain to the other side. And I've lived in Wiltshire for what is it? It's 20 years now. Wow. 20 years. Up on me, yes.
Had you grown up in a rural area or not? Have you lived in different parts?
Yes. So yeah, I first of all, till I was about 3, I lived in a small town in Gloucestershire, and then we moved to a village in Hertfordshire. And then when I was sort of a teenager, we were living in a sort of market town-sized town in Hertfordshire as well. So it's always been rural-ish, should we say?
Yeah, different kinds of rural, yes. Yeah. So tell us a bit then about how your work how this project Queer River came about, how it fitted in and came out of your practice, and where the idea came from.
I've been thinking about that this morning. Not that I never think about it before, but it's kind of various strands that have come together, really. And I've done a fair amount of writing about my practice in the past, exploring where this focus on people and places, and especially ecology, comes from. And as part of that, I've looked at how, when I was growing up, a feeling of, not belonging and not feeling connected in certain ways, or not seeing myself reflected in society around me, I felt led me to spending more time outside, more time, in the garden or in the woods, or where I did feel a sense of connection and belonging, and where there wasn't, so belonging and connection within the wider context beyond our society, if you like.
Interesting.
And then more recently, a couple of years ago, I received a bursary to research the relationship between urban and rural place-based arts practice. And at the same time, another thread was that I was doing some work with Climate Museum UK. So I was looking at LGBT perspectives on climate justice. So these all have come together in lockdown to focus on my locality and then look at the relationship between that and the sort of global perspective, really.
Interesting. And well, I know Piers Torday last week talked about the countryside being a place for him of non-judgment, certainly growing up, away from people anyway. I think he sort of had different reactions for the community he was in, but in terms of the nature and the environment. And I just wonder, from your perspective, yeah, how you interact with the countryside. What does it sort of mean for you in terms of both the project, but also as an individual artist?
Well, I've lived in cities at certain points in my life, particularly in my adult life, and I always felt quite claustrophobic. I always felt quite trapped. And so I sort of experimented with living in the city and visiting the countryside, or living in the countryside and visiting the city. And I found that this works for me, really. So where we are in Wiltshire, it is very rural, and yet, it's very easy to travel to cities for work or to see friends and so on. So for me, that's an ideal balance. And working as an artist, things have changed even just in the last couple of years, just looking at rural arts practice in terms of, connectivity. And through lockdown, for instance, a lot of conferences and events going online has made it a lot easier for me as someone living in a little village, to access events all over the country. So I think, even in that sort of recent last couple of years, it's made a huge difference to me and my work.
Interesting. And could you tell us about sort of some of the work that you've made or is coming out of this project? Are we talking different types of, sculpture, creations, exhibit work? Could you sort of give us a sense of that?
Sure. Well, the shape of the project, it's a research project, and the kind of methodology is that I'm walking and talking and making with different people along the rivers, as you mentioned. So far, there's been archaeologists involved, someone who works in river restoration, a writer, someone that works in the medical humanities, so looking at the role of art within health and well-being, and particularly starting to look at blue health, so the impact of being by or in water for health. So it's I haven't got sort of pre-planned output, but as I go along, what I'm doing is creating artwork in response to these conversations, documenting conversations through writing, and then sharing that through exhibitions and presentations and so on. So it's emergent. It's, what form it will take depends on the people I meet and the conversations that we have, essentially.
And yes, would you just sort of set off with people and do walks along parts of the river? How would you agree? What was the sort of process of where you'd walk, and what discoveries happened when you were on those walks?
Well, things are likely to be different as lockdown opens up, because what's tended to happen is that I've tended to walk with people that I know in some way, whether that's personally or through work, and who have expressed an interest in the project. Whereas as we come out of lockdown, and fingers crossed, I get some of the funding that I've applied for, I'll be able to actually basically pay for people's time to come and walk with me, people that either have got in touch with me or I've got in touch with them, and we have a shared interest, or at least our practices connect in some way. But so far, for instance, before each walk, we have a discussion around not who's going to lead it, but sometimes, for instance, that person is keen for me to share some of my practice with them. So I went for a walk with the writer and researcher Peter Reason recently, and he's doing a lot of research into panpsychism and rivers. But he was very interested in a practice that I carry out, which is making these kind of walking bundles. So these kind of handheld sculptures that evolve through collecting and gathering as you walk.
Oh, interesting.
So I was sharing that practice with him, and he was talking to me about his writing and his work. So it's very much an exchange, really.
Like an artistic conversation,
yeah. It's different in every case. So
that's fascinating. And in terms of then your plans with the project, so you've got this funding bid, hopefully that's going to pay off. Who would you like to be talking with? What other kind of people would be interesting to explore along these riversides?
Well, I'm keen to walk with more LGBT people. One of the things that I found living in this area is, yes, we are dotted about, but because, if you like, this is quite a niche sort of focus in terms of looking at LGBT people and rivers, I'm reaching out beyond my locality to help me do that. So, like we said before, whether they be artists, writers, researchers, scientists, whoever they are, if they've got an interest in sort of LGBT perspectives on rivers or climate justice or some related area, I'd just be really keen to talk with them, and hopefully in the future to take a walk with each other, and for that to become a part of the project.
The project as well. That's wonderful. And do you imagine then going to other types of rivers and river delta, across the country potentially?
Yeah, I mean, how it started off is me walking. Like, my river, so the Hampshire Avon, runs literally about half a mile from our house. So I've started with that essentially, and then we've added on the Bristol Avon. I've got personal connection with Bristol because I was born there and spent a lot of my time growing up there. but also a couple of the artists and researchers that I've made contact with are based in Bristol, so it made sense to include that. But then also I've been invited to go to Norfolk to speak about the work, and hopefully as it develops, yes, it will translate onto different rivers in different places.
As well, great. Do you have where can people follow the work and sort of stay in touch with it?
Yeah, the website is the best place to go, and people can, with each walk that I go on, a blog post is written, so it updates sort of, well, walk by walk. So it's queerriver.com.
Queerriver.com.
Easy to remember, so people can have a look, and if they're interested, just get in touch and we can have a conversation and see where it goes.
Brilliant. And just, I suppose, thinking about your resonance connection with the countryside again, and in terms of these rivers, have there been sort of emotional discoveries as well, or has it made you reflect on your own queerness and just get a sense of, yeah, sort of the journey that you've been on so far and how that's evolved?
Well, again, quite a recent, I'm spending a lot of time sort of using my arts practice to reflect on the conversations and the learning, and then that sort of sparks off, you know, I'll go off and listen to podcasts, do reading on theory and so on. And then that's informing my own, as you say, my own journey in terms of my own identity. So I've come to see that the river is very much a metaphorical river as well as a physical river that we're walking along. It's about sort of becoming with the river. You know, as I walk and as I talk and as I make work, I feel my sense of identity evolving through relationship with the river. So, and also just trying out different language. So, you know, again, growing up and, you know, becoming a young man and coming out as gay, I was never that comfortable with the word gay. And I think perhaps that's because it's sort of in opposition to straight. Perhaps that was the only thing that was available to me, so I took it on. Whereas now I'm exploring queer as a concept, and I'm more comfortable with that. I feel like it gives me greater freedom to develop a sense of self which fits me, rather than, if you like, take on board one that already exists.
It doesn't feel so defined as a boundary, whereas you have a dialogue with these other aspects of identity that can be queered, aside from sex, being defined against straightness. I think that feels like something that resonates with a lot of people I've been speaking to as well. That's wonderful. And so can you just describe what the bit of river is like, the sort of that's at the end of the garden, you're sort of half a mile away? What is the river like there?
I talked at an event recently, and one interesting thing that came up was that access to the river is actually very restricted, and that quite often it's at certain crossing points. So the part that I tend to go to is a part where there's two bridges that go across the river. And in lockdown, we've got a 9-year-old son who's back at school today, which makes it easier doing this. In lockdown, we went down to the river quite a lot and just sort of, I don't know, it's like a regular point of contact. We'd go down, we'd sail over the river, we'd see what we was doing, whether the water level was high or low, and we'd look out for otters because we've seen the footprints, but we've never seen them. So it's strange. It's just a particular point in the landscape that's become a regular, not a pilgrimage as such, but a point of focus that me and my son have been going to quite regularly in lockdown. So that sort of changed my relationship with it as well. But basically, it's a chalk stream.
Chalk stream, okay.
It's quite near the source where we are, so it can be very low, or it can quickly rise up quite high and flood the fields as well. So it's very changeable.
Dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. I think it's such a fascinating project. I love this idea of these sort of collection bundles of art that you create sort of on the move and whatever's. That sounds fascinating. And I suppose do you find all kinds of stuff by the river? Like, do you find strange things by the river as well as you walk along?
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I always find stuff wherever I go. I mean, that's I guess that's one of the attractions for me, that working with museums and heritage organisations, I've always collected things, and I'm quite interested in that in relationship to identity as well. You know, what we notice about the same place, what I would collect would be perhaps very different to what you'd collect. So that's become part of my practice as well. When we gather something together and then look back at it, what can it tell us about ourselves, really?
That's it. That's fascinating. Well, hopefully we'll be able to see some of the work maybe with the heritage organisations we're working with later this year as well. But people can follow you at queerriver.com.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great.
Keep up with the blog updates. Great. Well, thank you, James. It's been wonderful talking with you and hearing about your project. And we'll be joining again next week with another talk, and then we'll be having a short break before the next series. But thank you for following, and you can catch up with all of our previous talks via our Instagram. We are also we're on Torch's website at Oxford, so you can follow us there, and we have our own website at queerruralx.com as well, so you can keep up to news with everyone there as well. Okay, thanks everyone, and thank you, James.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Cheers. Bye.